This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Subscribe to the podcast Beyond Politics. They host some of the biggest names and smartest minds. Beyond Politics is from a former Democratic congressman who helped ignite Barack Obama's campaign and a former campaign manager and political columnist. They go beyond the usual chatter on politics, news, science, and books. It's politics and everything beyond. On Beyond Politics, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Broadcasting live on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, as well as in the evenings on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. It is the Matt McNeil Show for your Tuesday. Good to have you with us today. Patrick Coolican from the Minnesota Reformer joining us in the 4 o'clock hour, but I am just tickled pink here because Patti Vasquez is kind enough to join us. You hear her in Minneapolis in the 9 p.m. hour, of course, in Chicago, 5 to 7 down there on the drive home. And my bestie was kind enough to join me again today. Hey!
Hello. Happy Monday.
Happy Tuesday.
Oh, jeez. I am off. I had the day off yesterday, so technically this is my beginning of the week.
I'm the same way, and I'm already having troubles when I'm just on a normal week anyway. I mean, if you watch me on the show and I say there's always a quick little millisecond of Tuesday. All right, there it is, Tuesday. So
same, totally same. By the way, I'm joining you from Los Angeles, just so you know, this is not my beautiful home.
Oh.
For those watching, I'm visiting friends out here. So.
Well, and I hope you're having a good time out there. I wanted to have, I'm having all my favorites on to go through the spike the football moment here of Trump getting found guilty and every Republican wetting themselves. So,
It's so crazy.
Well, last Thursday we were doing the show, and I'm thinking we're sending the jury home, and it happens. When you heard all counts guilty, talk about what you went through there?
I was surprised. I mean, because here I thought that that when they asked for the note, they asked for testimony from Pecker, from Cohen, and then they asked for the jury instructions. I thought something was happening. I thought that they were like arguing and trying to select what they could convict on. I thought it was going to be a hung jury. I think that was my instinct. So I was flabbergasted. I was stunned. And then, this, how quickly the trolls, the rage, they just started filling up everything that I like, not even just that day and our reaction to it, but going back weeks, like they're just looking for people to attack, the crying, the screaming, for people who told us to honor the system. When Kyle Rittenhouse was convicted, they're like, honor the jury. And like, we let that, there are protests, but we let it go. We're like, all right, that's the way that worked out. But they're like, no, this is rigged. The judge is can't be impartial. But how do you not just question the process? And it's happening over and over again. The people surrounding him who've been indicted, who have been prosecuted and found guilty, many of whom have been imprisoned. I like the disconnect from reality and the truth is staggering. It really is.
It is amazing to watch how all of them got in line. That it wasn't just the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Lauren Boeberts. The Speaker Johnson is out there. The Senate leadership is out there, all talking about somehow some star chamber control thing of, that Biden controlling the New York state government, the court system, and basically that somehow knowing he was going to be president, he was going to win the election in 2020, started this investigation in 2018. And so, there's just no level of, I've always said this. I said these people do not want reality; they want their narrative validated. And so when something butts up against it, like Trump's guilty of 34 counts because he tried to pay off a porn star and keep it quiet so he could win the election in 2016. When that happens, all of a sudden it just has to the entire psychosis, the id of the Republican Party has to scream, "It's not true," and that's just it.
I agree. And, I went like that day when they were, they said this is entirely political. If he wasn't, they never went after him for other things. Only I checked, and he's been the defendant in civil cases in hundreds. There are over 4,000 cases because, he also sues.
Yeah.
But there have been hundreds of cases where he's been the defendant going back decades. So they can all spare me with it's, no, he's always been a horrible person and you have fallen for it. Some of them are they haven't fallen for it. Some of them are committed to the lies, to the deceitfulness, to wanting to impose their values, whether it's, racism or Christian nationalism or whatever it is. They are committed to it no matter what form. He's their Trojan horse. They all just pile in, get through the gates, and do what they want, which is what they did with the judges. They refuse to acknowledge that this has been he has been a horrible human being for as long. His father being a slumlord and racist, and he was raised in it. He's covered in the muck, and they walk up to him and they're like, "We want some of that. We want to rub up all against that muck. We make us as slippery as possible."
Okay, so something you'll appreciate. So this morning I'm walking my dog, and there is a neighbor couple. They just had a new baby. Great.
Oh.
And I remember when that was like, and when I my 3 kids, and you wanted so much, no matter what you were doing beforehand, it didn't matter. You wanted to be there when your child experienced the sun for the first time, or the wind, or a dog, or the tree, and all this stuff. And it's so much fun. Donald Trump dumped his kid and ran to a porn star. And I just sort of, at what point do you kind of wrap your inability to wrap your mind around the fact that this is there in every town in America, there are guys like this. And we all know them, and we all despise them, and we all mock them. Yet this guy is running the president, and they all worship him. And it is just amazing.
It is, and I also feel bad for people who just fall for it, right? There are parts, there are people who, their religion, their way of life, they value it so much, and they feel like he's the right guy for that, and nothing else matters, right? They have tunnel vision to protect those ideals. And then there are people who willfully go along with this and spread the lies. There are people I feel sorry for who fell for the grift. You've been tricked. Yeah. And I feel sorry for you that and the amount of money that he's raising, that they are contributing, that we know is going to go entirely to his legal fees, is going to hurt Republicans up and down the ballot now because, and look, there are Republican leaders, including in Illinois, who are saying, do not contribute to the RNC. It is not going to help us. Mm-hmm. It is we're going to suffer because of the way they're distributing the money. Because Laura Trump's been very honest. It's all going to be to get him into office. It is crazy town. It really is. I can't wrap my mind around it. Well, and I was really disappointed with Georgia, by the way, how long it's going to take to decide whether to. Yeah.
Well, it's they're trying their best to run. There are still people there trying to run cover for him. Look, go to Larry Hogan out in Maryland. Now, I have a friend who used to work for him, and he sort of said, this is like the most moderate Republican I've ever worked with. He comes on out. He's running for Senate out in Maryland. He comes on out and said, we need to respect the judicial system. That's all he said. That's all he said. He is persona non grata now within the Republican Party. They can't stand him. And Laura Trump actually took time to say he's the worst kind of person. This is not, we don't have to talk any longer about fascist dictators. It's one way. Donald Trump was robbed. He's not guilty because, and once again, they don't want to face the reality that they follow a flawed human, that the guy that tells them that they're not the loser, that everyone else is a loser is actually wrong. They don't want to face that. So, that's how you get this stuff into power like this. And I feel sorry for moderate Republicans to a point, not completely because they still voted for Trump. Yeah. But I feel sorry for them because they look around and they cannot go anywhere but basically put their tail between their legs and follow, or else just stay home and try to be as quiet as possible.
Well, to your point about feeling sorry for them, this goes to Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. Yeah. I'm grateful for what they've done, but they have been a part of this from the beginning, from the dog whistles of the 80s, and were Reagan Republicans, which Reagan dismantled the labor strength, right? Yeah. By crushing the air controllers union and then making it okay for corporations to destroy unions. And it has the gap between the uber wealthy and the working class was ushered in by Ronald Reagan. So and then all the Willie Horton stuff during, the Dukakis campaign, or was it, Dukakis, right, in Boston. All that's, they have been blowing the racism whistle, the Christian values whistle when it came to feminism and abortion. They've been a part of this. They have created this monster, and I appreciate those that want to, go back and try to find some way to harness what they intended. But no, they wanted this. It was always guns and babies, Christianity. It's the liberal elite, right? They're smarter. They're all too smart and bookish. Well, I don't want to, go after what liberals could and should have done. But, in the face of what they were doing, we did the best that we could, at least.
Yeah. And I'm proof that the liberal elite with intelligence, not all the time. Patti Vasquez joining us. One thing, I'm going to go dark here, okay? 30%, 30, not this kind of dark.
Oh, boy.
30% of this country follows him and loves him. And I think that they are willing to go down these lines. I have noticed a definite change in rhetoric. Talk about, we have to fight civil wars. We have to use our guns. We have to do these things. This is coming from the right now. I think that when you talk about the racists and the Christian nationalists, they realize they are closer than they've ever been in this country to taking control and never giving it back. And I think that's the end game here, is that if they don't think they can win, they're going to do anything in their power to overthrow the government at this point.
And also, to your point about the rhetoric, I'm also seeing a lot more biblical references to retaliation, revenge, and wrath, and people that that I knew for years that we didn't agree, but people that I had been friends with, and then became friendly, and then became not. I can't be in the same room. They're unhinged.
Oh, yeah.
I know I'm wearing a shirt that says "unhinged woman," but they're off the deep end this week, because and the posts that I'm getting, the threats of violence, the absolute sheer hatred. Yeah. And they don't see it. Like I said earlier, that disconnect between logic and reason and just decent humanity is staggering. It's shocking, for sure. Well,
and I think that it's, like I said, we've never been closer. There have been fringe elements. Obviously, the Civil War was the one time this country imploded, and that was slavery. But when you're talking about, evil people with a personal agenda, usually it's like the Whiskey Rebellion or something like that. It's beaten back fairly quickly. This is, I have a bad feeling this is going to haunt us for decades.
Oh, it already definitely will, because of the Supreme Court. I'm sure there's something I could point to, or other people could, that predates Citizens United, but we can track a lot of this to Citizens United and the power that corporations and billionaires have over our political system. Just in the last few days, there's a Twitter account. I know there's a Twitter account called More Perfect Union, and they track so many of the ways corporations are destroying the middle class and working people's lives. Yeah.
Patti Vasquez, kind enough to join us from Los Angeles as we're talking Trump. When we come on back, I want to talk about the Republicans imploding on abortion, and I've got a funny story for you to start that off with. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Let's take a break on your Tuesday. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Through the night, for every kiss, your beauty.
It's the Matt McNeil Show with Patti Vasquez, kind enough to join us once again, 9 p.m. tonight here on AM 950, in the afternoons in Chicago, 5 to 7 weeknights. It is a fantastic drive time show if you've not ever had the chance to enjoy that. If you're an MSP, get down to Chicago, make sure you're listening to that. And Chicago, get up here. We're having fun. 9 p.m. here in town. I'll give shout out to Minocqua Brewing. That's where you got that great shirt.
Yes, there was, a lot of people will leave reviews for his tap room and clearly have never been there. They're like, the owner is an unhinged woman. So Kirk Bangstead, who is the owner, and decided to make a whole, he takes a lot of the reviews and turns them into shirts and different, elements, whether it's abortion rights or voting rights, all those things. So MinocquaBrewingCompany.com, a little shout out to my sponsor. Sorry, I don't know if I should do.
No, you're more than welcome to. We've worked with them in the past as well. They're fantastic. Okay, so I had a person come to me and just a right-wing person, all upset, all angry, because all you Democrats have given up the ghost. Look at you. You're all for abortion rights now. And I'm like, okay, so wait a second. You kicked the door open. You told us to go in through the door. We did, and now you're angry at us because of your actions? It is amazing to me. They clearly, I mean, I had the story yesterday. South Dakota's got a ballot initiative. It's leading by 20 points in South Dakota.
To enshrine abortion rights?
To undo what Kristi Noem's abortion restrictions there. So
wow.
you've got, I mean, this is one of those things where, you know, they caught the dog that caught the car. They don't know what to do with it. And so all they can do is just scream at us and act like we're somehow inferior because they were too stupid to realize what they were about to do.
Well, and the thing is, and to your point about how these are doing these resolutions and referendums in Missouri, they needed 180,000 signatures to get on the ballot to protect abortion rights. They've collected over 360,000, I think, more than double. So that shows you the energy behind that. And then places like Texas they want to put the idea of capital punishment for women who have abortions. So what they're saying is, if you are raped and you want to make sure that you take care of yourself, the punishment for an abortion is worse than what the person who raped you would receive.
Yeah.
Like make this make sense, folks. No, they can't.
Well, and that is, and I just read a story today from CBS News about, the woman, unfortunately they lost their child, and the nightmare scenario that they had to go through with multiple doctors, multiple hospitals, because the laws are so vague that even if you have a fetus with no heartbeat, that there's no way that you really can, abort that, even though it's the fetus is dead. You're going to die if this doesn't get out. And they basically said, have you thought about going to New Mexico?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So I recently traveled by Amtrak to New Orleans, and I fell asleep like somewhere in Indiana, and I woke up in Mississippi, and it struck me that every state I had traveled through, if I was younger and still of childbearing age, how unsafe I would be. Let's say, one, if I was sexually assaulted and my ability to take care of myself would be hindered. But what if I was pregnant and had a medical emergency? And the idea that I would not be able to get care where I was is just astounding to me. And to assume that, and to force women who maybe, whether it's financial or, when you need that kind of care, you also need to recover. So now you have to recover in New Mexico, not surrounded by the people who might support you at home, maybe take care of the other kids that you have, help you bring a casserole dish, just the things that we do to uplift each other. I hate this so much. I hate this timeline so much. Yeah, I really do.
Well, you have Missouri, Tennessee, I think Alabama all put forward arguments that, and none of these passed because obviously it gets struck down pretty quick, to prevent pregnant women from leaving the state. That right. It is the Handmaid's Tale. I mean, it's this insanity, all by white elderly men. All by elderly white men, and I just
and the women who support that. I mentioned earlier my friend who was posting Deuteronomy quotes about revenge and wrath. Like, she's out of her mind. She's one of these people who thinks that Michelle Obama is a man. Like, what the thing, and you know what I really hate about this too, all these QAnon people, especially like the guy yesterday who was in the Fauci hearings, mocking him behind his back, right? That Jan 6 guy.
Yeah.
Like even when presented with the truth, there's never like, oh yeah, I was wrong about that. Like, I have a friend, let's call him Tim because that's his name, Slagle. And he like, I remember in Clinton, when Clinton was running, Hillary Clinton, he said, oh, if you look at the pictures, she's clearly sick. She's got a white spot on her tongue. She's got cancer. She's terminal. Well, here we are, freaking 8 years later, and like no semblance of like, well, I was wrong about, is it possible you could be wrong about, I don't know, everything.
Yeah.
I know that, like, look, here's the thing. And that's the thing. It's one of our strengths, but it also is what has given them so much ground, is that when we are confronted with the facts, when there's something that contrasts with what we believed, we are, for the most part, willing to go, oh, thank you for correcting me. I will now act appropriately. Mm-hmm. And they don't do that. Mm-hmm. They are so committed to their lies that they can't.
Well, and until you get it out either into a court or out in the public, which brings up Florida, because they're going to have, we talked about South Dakota as a 20-point swing. Florida is going to have an abortion amendment on their ballot. And have you noticed that Florida, the psychos down there, the Republican Party, have all of a sudden changed their tone and dynamic, and they're not really talking about abortion anymore? They very quickly, because they know Rick Scott barely won election down there, and they know as well that this is an issue that motivates particularly Republican women to go out there and vote, and they're seeing the writing on the wall. I'm hoping Florida goes the way I think it's going to go.
I hope so too. I think that you're right. I think that we have a chance there, and there are places where I think that there are people really doing a lot of groundwork. Like in Missouri and in Wisconsin, the percentage of Republicans that are being challenged it has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Missouri is at like 80% when they were at like less than 20 previously of Republicans being challenged, and I think Wisconsin in their first post, unrigging the gerrymandering, they're at I think 94% of the seats of people running for office. So it's amazing with Democrats going.
Well, and that's how we did it in Minnesota. Oh, it's exactly how we did it in Minnesota. Yeah. You basically, even if it's a deep red district, if they have to spend money, if they have to defend themselves, it helps everywhere down the ticket. The reason why Minnesota has the trifecta right now is because we had great DFL candidates out in these rural districts running, and basically it helped the other districts across the board.
Yeah, thank you, DFL. We love DFL. We want more of that, please. Amazing.
So, I'm going to ask, Chicago, I'm presuming you guys have a huge Pride event coming up here at some point, right?
Yes, we have our big Pride event. It's the last Sunday of the month. We're going to be, WCPT will be in the parade. I had a dream last night, Matt, that I was in a verbal altercation with somebody, long story about that, but I dreamt that I missed the parade. And I was so devastated. I was heartbroken. I don't know if you remember the episode of Joey from, Friends, where Joey misses, he's supposed to be on the parade with all the people from his soap opera. That's how I felt. I was like, oh! In my dream. So I will definitely be there. I'm going to be there like camping out the night before to make sure I make it.
All right.
It's spectacular in Chicago.
I might have to head on down. Of course, we got ours about the same time, so we'll have to figure this out. But we got to see each other again. I miss you, dear.
Next week. I won't be able to see you because we don't do video as well as you guys do. Maybe next Monday or Tuesday.
By all means.
Sound good?
Patti Vasquez, once again, 9 p.m. tonight here on AM 950. Of course, 5 to 7 in the afternoons on WCPT 820. Patti, all my best. Travel safe back to Chicago, okay?
Thank you. Love you, Matt.
Take care.
Minnesota.
We'll take a break. Come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Mama said, fulfill the prophecy, be something great.
It is the Matt McNeil Show in the evenings on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, and AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Good to have you with us today. I got to tell you, Patti Vasquez, I love Chicago. I love being in your city. Your city is awesome. I mean, it's so freaking awesome. It really is. I think meeting Patti and being able to do her show live was probably one of my favorite things I did down there. She is so bright, bubbly, smart, wickedly intelligent, and just so quick. I mean, I adore her. I mean, she's just a gem, and I'm glad she's on both the stations that I'm on too, because I mean, more people need to hear Patti. More people need to hear Patti. It is just that simple. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Patrick, how are we today? We didn't get a chance to say hello before we got Patti on the air.
Things are going just peachy today.
There's a lot of news that's going on today. I mean, for the first time in a few days, it's not. We haven't been hammered with Trump per se, although there's the hearings, the Fauci hearing yesterday, and then the Merrick Garland hearing today, and where they basically they used it as a stunt. He's used it as a stunt here, but I actually want to bring up something that I caught last night, and if you haven't caught it, the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, when he is on, he is spectacular. And last night he went off on the news media. And there is something that is ethereal about that dude when he gets going, because he points out the flaws in a very complicated problem and presents them in a very simplistic manner to which it's almost kind of like there was the before and after. You didn't think you could approach a subject, and then Jon Stewart will sometimes break it down, and you're like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And he went after the news media, and one of the things that the news media doesn't really do, which is, well, when someone says something that's an outright lie, such as when Donald Trump was on the Fox and Friends with the three stupider people that don't make the main team of Fox and Friends, the weekend Fox and Friends people, and he says there, I never said lock her up, even though he said it over and over and over and over again, was his entire thing. That not one of them had the audacity to say, well, wait a second here, sir. With all due respect, I understand you might not be rethinking it now, but you did say this numerous times. And it'd be easy just to sort of sit there and say this is Fox News' problem, but Stewart last night did a little segment where basically all the news media does today is ask specific questions about potential hypothetical future scenarios. Well, if the election happens, will you accept the results? Will your support for Donald Trump waver if he's convicted of a crime? That sort of thing. Where that's not really journalism. That's just, fantasizing about a dream date, for God's sakes. Sitting there, oh God, wouldn't it be great if this could happen? One the way I would say it is, it's journalism that comes from the same part of the mind where you fantasize about what you do if you won one of those big lottery things. Oh, the first thing I would do is I'd do this, and I go do this, and I go do this. Well, that's not news. And over and over and over again, today, we do not have people calling out journalists. I, up here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, was recently fairly critical of one local journalist here who basically got a press release from the Republican Party and used that as his basis for the questions against the Democratic governor. And if you think about that, you say to yourself, is that a big deal? No one used to do that. You used to go and report the news. You didn't get one political party sending you the talking points and then questioning the other political party on the talking points you got from the other side. There is a laziness. I get it. You don't have the staffs you used to. You used to have, a media staff, which was, so many people, and you do research and you have investigative teams and you do these things and there'd be follow-ups and there's, I get it. You don't have that anymore. But that's not an excuse to allow people to just come on your network and lie over and over and over again and never once say, sir, that's just not true. And I get that they might scream, but then you look at them and say, sir, if you just keep screaming, this interview's over. I want an answer. If you're not going to answer questions, which is what you promised you'd do when you came onto this interview, then we're done talking. And then tell them to go. But Matt, they might accuse me of being a loony liberal or a wacky conservative. It doesn't matter. That's not your job to make them feel welcome. Your job is to get answers and find out what is actually going on. That's called journalism. And the fact that I, the trained chimp of a radio host, have to kind of remind people of this all the time, and Jon Stewart last night reminded these people once again. I mean, not only do I think the Republicans are terrified of Jon Stewart coming back and doing his show as much as he has, I think the news media itself is terrified because he so quickly can see through the falsities. I mean, I remember when he went on Crossfire and absolutely annihilated that show. to their faces. What are you guys doing? Every issue is not a one side or the other. Stop it. And he was exactly right. The news media in this country has got a lot of problems. And there are good news journalists. I can tell you about 20 or 30 of them. If you're in Chicago, you ever want to read the Minnesota Reformer, that's Patrick Coolican's coming up in my next hour. Fantastic. The Reformer does a great job. There are local, reporters up here in the Twin Cities. Brianna Bierschbach, Susan Dew, Andy Mannix is fantastic. Dear God, Andy Mannix deserves his own investigative team, for God's sakes. You get people at the Sahan Journal, stuff like that. That are really good. That are really good journalists. But the problem is they're generally in alt form. Not all of them. But they're in alt form or not in traditional where the mainstream journalism is. And our lack of having quality journalists actually holding politicians accountable is really hurting this country. And whether that's by design, as in Fox News, which not only tries their hardest to make Democrats look bad, but does their hardest to basically bury stories. I talked about 2,000 Mules. I talked to a conservative guy yesterday who got in touch with me after the show and said, 2,000 Mules is completely true. I said, no, it's not. And I shared with him the news stories. And he said, well, no one's talking about it on any of the news outlets I'm watching. I said, which ones are you watching? And he said, Fox and Newsmax. I said, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So whether it's by design or just by ineptitude, we need to have a better news media. Newsrooms typically immersed in political coverage during the presidential election are instead focused on saving their own businesses. This is not helping. Major restructuring, layoffs, and newsroom overhauls are unusual for America's biggest news companies just months ahead of a highly anticipated presidential race. I would make an argument that considering a lot of people that own news media are conservatives, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a little bit by design. Major restructuring layoffs are once again are going to hurt the anticipated presidential race coverage. With businesses' headwinds growing stronger, news leaders know they can't afford to push off changes any longer. Subscription media growth has slowed as publishers struggle to replace customers who canceled their Trump-era subscriptions. The Washington Post on Sunday announced sweeping changes to its editorial structure and leadership with its first-ever female executive editor, Sally Busby, stepping down to make way for Matt Murray, former editor-in-chief at the Wall Street Journal. Murray will take over the role until 2024 U.S. presidential election, after which he will move to lead the new newsroom division focused on social and service journalism. Robert Winnett, deputy editor of the Telegraph Media Group, will replace Murray as leader of the paper's core newsroom via a newly created position. The Post is one of several major newspapers trying to find new readers willing to pay for the journalism online before the traditional products die out. CNN began testing a new strategy last month that asked readers to submit personal data like their email address if they want to continue reading on a certain amount of daily articles for free. It marks the company's most significant consumer-facing effort to begin reestablishing a direct-to-consumer relationship with readers after the fall of subscriptions video app CNN Plus in 2022. The Wall Street Journal, similar, has undergone massive changes to its editorial structure under new editor Emma Tucker, including layoffs announced last week. On Wednesday, the paper introduced a new multi-million-dollar brand advertising campaign geared towards broadening the journal's subscriber appeal to a wider set of business professionals, not just finance investors or C-suite executives. ABC News president Kim Goodwin, the first black woman to lead a major news division, stepped down in May after staffers began to lose confidence in her leadership. Disney executive Deborah O'Connell will lead the news division for the time being, a Disney executive. And nothing against Miss O'Connell, but, that would have never happened in the past. I mean, that just wouldn't. Washington Post CEO Will Lewis became under intense fire after staff meeting on Monday after a sudden announcement around Busby's departure. At one point, he told the paper staff, "We are losing large amounts of money. Your audience has halved in recent years. People are not reading your stuff. You can't sugarcoat it anymore." More American media companies are focused on consumer revenue amid a weak advertising market and increasing threats from AI. To do so, many are trying to recruit executives with experience managing paywall newsrooms. That often comes at the expense of diversity, and in many cases includes a focus on British talent. The newsroom leaders of the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg News are currently all British, hailing from the News Corp titles. And The Economist, the Washington Post, will join the list by the end of the year. The other business side, the Post Lewis, a longtime News Corp executive, is British, as are his newly installed chief growth. I don't know why Britain is doing so well there, but it's the death of the news. Because, once again, and we talked about this with Patty, and I've been talking about this for a while, Republicans don't want news. They want their opinions validated. And if you dare say something that's wrong, as I mentioned with Patti Vasquez, Larry Hogan, the Republican out in Maryland, who said we should trust that needs to be destroyed. And they have successfully done this. Because, frankly, if I can be blunt, it's the mutilation of the journalism product to serve the lowest common denominator. You used to write articles. I mean, you go back and watch the movie All the President's Men, and you watch the level and the extent of the work that the journalists did in that case to uncover Nixon's lies. Today, if that happened, when everyone around them would have said, well, we're not talking, and they would just come in and they're not talking, so there's no story here. And that's just the reality of it. Because you want, I don't want to say it's as blithe as which SpongeBob character are you kind of thing, but it's getting that way. And the reality is we know less and less about the world. We know less and less about our neighborhoods. We know less and less about what's actually going on today, even though we have so many damn channels. Because the reality is that most people are not willing to watch something that challenges their narrative. And so what does the news media do? What did Jon Stewart point out last night? They just ask a bunch of hypothetical questions about what could happen and act like that's journalism. It's not. And journalism is it's dying, and it's dying a very painful to watch death. We'll take a break, come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
You gotta show up if we're gonna blow up. Come and hold your torches in the sky until we light up. No matter what they told us, nothing's gonna hold us. Come and hold your torches in the sky until we light up.
It is the Matt McNeil Show. 952-946-6205. By the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Heartland Signal as well. One of the great news outlets we still have left in this country. And I'm actually reading one of their stories coming up here in the next hour. So, no, there are outlets out there. It just is, I think what that's going to be is it's going to be Heartland Signal and the Minnesota Reformer and all these other ones that's where you're going to find journalism anymore. And the rest of it is, tell me your favorite hamburger in town. And that's what, those are questions they're going to ask the journalists are going to ask the politicians. Because we don't want to upset anyone. And by not upsetting anyone, you basically have killed your product. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So, the Wisconsin Attorney General on Tuesday filed charges against 3 allies of Donald Trump, accused of taking part in the effort to put forth a slate of fake electors and usurp the 2020 presidential election, according to online court records. By the way, this is another thing Stewart brought up last night, which is that the reason it's a real dangerous thing where Trump and the Republicans are saying you can't trust the court system anymore because quite literally, as he showed, the courts are the only place you're getting these people telling the truth anymore. The courts are the only place that they are saying anything, that is, where they basically have to go on the record. And Jon Stewart pointed out is like when they're talking about election fraud, that they talk about election fraud all the time, but all of a sudden in the courtroom, both Giuliani and Trump's lawyers are like, oh well, wait, we're not contesting the election. Who said we're contesting the election? We're not contesting the election. Funny, when they're in a court and they're on the record and their comments have consequences. And notice how they don't even think about that anymore when it comes to talking to any news outlets. They don't. That was the one thing I thought was funny is that, when you do talk to these news outlets, and they're still doing it, the Heartland Signals, the Minnesota Reformers, the other ones that are out there. We had Aaron Rupar on yesterday, with Public Notice. It says, they don't return my phone calls because they know they can't manipulate us. You go get them. The men, I was wondering when we see Cheesebro show back up again. Kenneth Cheesebro, a right-wing attorney who helped drive the fake elector pilot. Jim Tropis, that's a new name, a former Trump lawyer. Now there's a few stacks of those out behind most buildings. And Michael Roman, a former Trump campaign official, are each facing a single forgery charge. Wisconsin is the latest state to bring charges against people connected to the former president involved in a broad effort to overturn the presidential election results. State prosecutors in Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and in Georgia have brought charges against a swath of Trump allies. The attorney for Cheesebro declined to comment and has reached out to attorneys. The news outlets also reached out to the attorneys to find out any comments from them. Democratic Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers issued a one-word response to the charges Tuesday. Good. It's been previously reported that Cheesebro was helping investigators in at least 4 states, including Wisconsin, who were looking into the fake elector scheme. Cheesebro's lawyers had believed that the corporation would be enough for him to stave off charge, or the cooperation, not corporation. The cooperation would be enough to stave off the charges. Last year, 10 fake electors from Wisconsin disavowed their attempt to overturn Trump's deficit in 2020, recognized the legitimacy of President Joe Biden's victory, and pledged not to serve as real electors in 2024 in any election until when Trump is on the ballot, or to act as a sham electors in any future election as part of a civil lawsuit settlement. The 10 fake electors issued a statement acknowledging their phony certificates they signed in December were used as part of an attempt to improperly overturn the lawful election results. We hereby reaffirm that Joseph Biden won the 2020 presidential election, and we were not duly elected presidential electors for the state of Wisconsin in 2020 presidential election, says a portion of the statement. We oppose any attempt to undermine the public's faith in the ultimate results of the 2020 presidential election. The fact that these are forgery charges, did I read that correctly? They're facing a single forgery charge. Goes back to another element of this, which is, and I'm not making excuses, all these people, like I said, they were all furious that they kind of got caught. I mean, they all are. But there clearly was a lot of lying going on, and that's what I believe these charges are for, is that they tricked people into doing this and to carrying these fake electors as a way to try to, once again, overthrow the government of the United States. The fact that we don't have people saying it like that, which it was. They attempted to overthrow the government of the United States. And yeah, so I hope these people face jail time. Cheesebro, once again, is once you get them to flipping one, and now he's like Cirque du Soleil. He's flipping all over the place, man. I feel sorry. Wisconsin and Minnesota at one point in 2010 faced a very similar potential future. And what saved Minnesota from becoming like Wisconsin was a third party that took just enough votes away from the Republicans that Tom Emmer, yes, that Tom Emmer, the large jar of Elmer's glue, that Tom Emmer lost the governor's race to, at that point, Mark Dayton. And that the Democrats took control of the state, whereas in Wisconsin, little Scotty Walker came into power with his little commando unit and basically jerry-rigged the living daylights out of that state to basically allow 30% of the population to control 70% of the seats. And don't fool yourself. What the Republicans did with the gerrymandering in Wisconsin was science. They went block by block to make sure they basically were able to pull that off. And now that it's being undone, thank God, things are looking better there. I'm glad they are starting to change because Wisconsin used to be somewhat normal. It used to be. And to watch the Republicans violate it so badly has been very hard. And, like I said, I think it's changing now. The fact that the Democrats are challenging in every freaking race in that state, or most of them, is a really good sign because that will pay dividends down the road. The same thing goes Illinois, Minnesota. If your Democratic Party is not running candidates in every race, they need to be, and make sure you get on them to make sure that happens. Chicago, have a good one. We are back on a Wednesday. Minneapolis, St. Paul, hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here on your now I'm doing it. Tuesday, Matt McNeil show. Brett is in studio. Patrick here as well. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. A big deal this week. Of course, Orville Peck is coming to the Armory on June 11th. He's bringing the Stampede Tour to the Armory. Doors open at 7. He's got opening artist Duran Jones, Debbie Dawson. We are giving away pairs of tickets every day this week. Gave away some tickets yesterday. We've got more tickets to give away today. Listen for your chance to call in. You can win some tickets to Orville Peck. I'm a huge fan of Orville Peck. He's very good.
Absolutely. And we're giving away so many great tickets to all these events around town. Check him out. And Orville Peck, I had a chance to hear a little bit of his music. I wasn't familiar prior to then, and I think he's worth checking out.
You have to have kids who are in a certain age. It's like I knew about Orville Peck when they were watching a video from, was it Kimmel or Colbert? One of the two. I'm like, who is this? And yeah, very good, very good. We've got a problem in sports again.
Just one?
Oh, this is not Minnesota sports.
Okay,
this is all sports, and it is huge. San Diego Padres infielder. How do you say this guy's name?
Well, he's not going to be playing very much longer.
Marcano. He has been banned for life by Major League Baseball for betting on baseball games. And apparently was with the Pittsburgh Pirates last year, and he was betting on Pirates games while he played for them. Ugh. Which is, as well as announcing his punishment, that Major League Baseball also on Tuesday banned 4 other baseball players for a year apiece for violating the betting rules. According to a Major League Baseball investigator, he placed 387 baseball bets, including 231 Major League Baseball-related ones, over 2 periods in 2020 and 2023. See, his problem is he didn't have an interpreter he could blame for it. That's you get an interpreter, they're invaluable. It's like, oh, me? I mean, no, it was my interpreter who was betting millions of dollars without my knowledge.
It helps if you're a superstar and not some scrub no one's ever heard of, too, that can be the fall guy in the example person.
Nothing gets rid of a gambling addiction like a close call like that, does it?
Yeah.
We have no idea if he was. Anyway. This is basically placed all these bets as a member of the Pittsburgh Pirates. While he was on the injury list, he gambled more than $150,000 in baseball, with $87,319 of that on Major League Baseball bets. Major League Baseball investigation found that 25 of those bets included Pirates games while he's assigned to be a Major League club. The probe found that all of his bets were on which club, the Pirates or their opponent, would win the game, or whether there would be more or less than a certain number of runs scored in the game. So, obviously, and this week, now we're getting into the Pete Rose territory, because remember, he got busted for betting on games he managed for the Cincinnati Reds. The idea that the outcome is in question is what is the difference between Major League Baseball and any professional sport and the WWE. The professional wrestling is scripted. They have their stories. They have their things. This is not supposed to be there. The entire concept of the game. This is why when someone says to me back in the day, like with Darryl Strawberry, or was it Oil Can Boyd? Oil Can Boyd got banned for like 2 years because of drug use, or for a minimal amount of drug use, or like 2 months or something like that. And so, well, why is this? He's doing this horrible thing. Why is he doing this? Because what he's doing only hurts him. It doesn't violate the foundation of the game itself. And so, yeah, this is something that apparently there was a guy in the 1920s This is after the Chicago Black Sox scandal, who got caught gambling, and he was banned. But Pete Rose, of course, was, and Pete Rose, the tragedy of Pete Rose is he was an all-time great player, and he's nowhere near baseball anymore because he just couldn't stop betting on the games. I just, as this gets more and more crazy, I mean, that baseball stadium they're playing in is decked with gambling ads everywhere. The broadcast is brought this. Everything is, the whole thing. I mean, you look at the big Jumbotron. What's on there? It's the odds, over and under. They put it all up there, man.
Or even watching NBA playoff broadcasts. I've heard announcers talking about that during the game as well. You can bet on the games and saying, I'm thinking maybe this will happen. Yeah, it's everywhere, so it shouldn't be a surprise that this is happening. They're going to have to bust someone big at some point, though, for this to really have an impact, because this guy
Will it, though? Will it? I don't think it will. I'm going to make an argument. I would bet in the 4 major sports, NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA. I would bet at least 5% of the athletes are placing bets on games and violating their gambling policy, and they're doing it through fake accounts on gambling apps and stuff like this, and doing this. I have zero doubt of it, because they didn't even think about the reason why we separated this out. The reason why there was no sports teams in Vegas forever was because they didn't want these two paths to cross. And now all of a sudden, it's not only are those two paths crossing, they want the players to spoon with these online sports betting apps constantly, and then act as if, well, you should have known it's bad.
Yeah, it's a little different, too, with these apps where you don't need to go through a bookie where you have more people that's going to leave a paper trail of where you could get caught. Yeah, it's easier to just go on an app, use some pseudonym or a fake email, or they're probably a little more sophisticated than that. But I
got friends who travel the country, and they say if you watch a broadcast of a Dodgers game in Los Angeles or a Yankees game in New York, like 90% of the ads are freaking gambling app ads. Seriously.
Pick how many runs are going to be scored in tonight's game. Who's going to win? Who's going to be the player of the game? Bet tonight.
And it's kind of so nefarious. It's like, well, Aaron Judge is up here in 5 seconds. Do you think he's going to get hit or not? $100. Okay, I want to remind everybody. Those big-ass casinos did not get built on losing. They're not losing money. They're making money.
It was all just charity to help people out.
It's not a charitable group, although Donald Trump sure thought it was. They are making so much money. When you look at these sports betting apps, and they've got every celebrity and big retired athlete they can find, pimping their product. They're not doing that because they're losing so much money they can't afford this. No, they front you $1,000 in free bets because they know it's going to be gone instantly. Yeah, it's. I mean, I got to tell you the truth. I'm kind of scared. I know they did not get that betting bill done, but to a point, I'm kind of scared of where this is all going, because how long till we get a college quarterback who basically all of a sudden owes $2 million and has been throwing games because he got addicted to gambling? I mean, think about that.
Well, he'll pay it back by just signing a deal with FanDuel.
He will. As much as you joke about that, he was like, hey, you know me from betting. You know what's more important than the game? The bet. And they will. They will. Oh. I do a fantasy football league. I do the NCAA brackets. I don't go, hey, Matt, the Twins. I mean, I did the playoff game with Schechter. We had the playoff series with Schechter, the Yankees and the Twins. Yeah. I lost miserably. Thank you very much. I do this occasionally, but I'm always doing it tongue-in-cheek, and it's either I'm doing it for free or it's just a small little group where it's like $20 is the winner. You get like $20 doesn't even get you in a movie nowadays. So I'm kind of scared of where this is all going.
It's just scary with those apps thinking you're there watching a game. I'm bored. I'll put a couple bucks on whether this at bat goes 6 pitches or 8 pitches. You can make money on something as goofy as that.
God,
or
it is.
Whether a guy makes a free throw or how many times he dribbles. You can bet on anything with these games.
The Super Bowl, didn't they have some guy that basically lost his house? His wife went up on TikTok or something like that and threw a fit because they lost the house because he placed so many bets on the game and they lost almost all of them. Wow. Anyway, that's the latest, and I'm going to guess by the end of this decade, there'll probably be another 40 names on that list of banned for life just in baseball alone. Just in baseball alone, man. You work all that hard. You work your entire life honing your skill to get there, and you just can't. You cannot not bet. God, I mean, I just don't know what. I mean, well, it's an addiction. It's an addiction. It is. So I just, it scares me because I don't think sports are ever going to be the same again. Now that this is all, now what's done is done.
Yeah, it's too easy to bet on these now. Exactly.
By the way, before we get into Patrick Coolican, the Minnesota Reformer here, let's do something else here. Orville Peck is at the Armory on June 11th. I get a pair of tickets right now. A pair of tickets to go see Orville Peck at the Armory June 11th. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. Caller number 5. You will get those tickets to go see Orville Peck. 952-946-6205. Good luck with that. What are you and Patrick talking about?
Yeah, two main topics we're talking about today, and they've been the two ones that have been in the news. One is Mary Moriarty and her controversy with Governor Tim Walz in that case, and how Moriarty is leveling some accusations against Walz that he's not as friendly to people who are LGBTQ. So we're going to be talking about that controversy, as well as feeding our future and just that bonkers story of potentially having a juror trying to get paid off. Well, that's the accusation, someone trying to pay off the juror, but we're going to be talking about that more in the interview.
952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Caller 5 gets the Orville Peck tickets. It's Brett with Patrick Coolican from the Minnesota Reformer right now on AM 950.
AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Brett Johnson with you here on a Tuesday afternoon. And as usual on Tuesdays, we are joined by the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Reformer. That's Patrick Coolican over at minnesotareformer.com. As we are going to be talking about some of the stories they've been working on and some other items that have been in the news recently. And today, mainly two topics we're going to be focusing on, including this absolutely crazy deliberation that's happening with the Feeding Our Future trial, including a juror possibly, being attempted to be bribed. We'll also be talking about some controversy between Governor Tim Walz and Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty. Patrick, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So let's start off talking about Feeding Our Future, because a juror in that case was excused yesterday after prosecutors said an unidentified individual went to that juror's house on Sunday night and offered a bag of cash containing about $120,000 if this juror voted for acquittal. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Thompson said in an open court document that a woman in a Mazda drove to the juror's home in Spring Lake Park, left the bag of cash at her father-in-law, and said there will be another bag tomorrow if she voted to acquit the 7 defendants. The juror rightfully called 911 immediately after, and the FBI came to retrieve the money. The remaining jurors have all been questioned by the judge whether they had been contacted in a similar matter, and none said they had. But boy, Patrick, this is something that seems like it's coming straight out of like a legal or a spy thriller. I mean, this is something I've not heard of happening very often, at least in real life. What's your reaction to this just crazy story getting even weirder with Feeding Our Future in this trial?
Yeah, our reporter, Dina Winter, who's been at the trial most days for several weeks, and I'll tell you, she when she told me she wanted to be there most days, I was not entirely supportive because I just didn't want her to miss out on other stories while she was at the courthouse. But she was obviously right and made the right decision because it's been really a fascinating trial, and that was before Monday morning. She actually texted me on very early Monday morning, told me that she'd received a text from a courthouse source who said, "Get here, you're not going to believe it." And sure enough, a jury, the youngest member of the jury, 23 years old, the only person of color, we believe, on the jury, was approached Sunday night, not home, but her father-in-law took this package, and then, as you noted, she immediately called 911 when she got home. The judge yesterday said in court that the juror is quite terrified. I think if somebody shows up at your house with a bag of money and tells you, we'll give you more money if you do this, it's not just a promise, it's also this kind of a threat. So that juror has been removed. They also were forced at that point to seize everyone's cell phones after a search warrant was issued for them, the defendants, I should say, the 7 defendants. Then they had to have a detention hearing to determine whether or not they would detain the defendants who had been free, whether or not they needed to detain them because they are now suspects in this bribery case. Some of the arguments made in court by the prosecutor and apparently accepted by the judge were that really the only people who knew the identities of the jurors were the prosecution, the prosecutors, the defendants, and the defendants' lawyers. And so, therefore, it made sense to detain the defendants as part of this new bribery case. As Dina, our reporter, pointed out this morning in our Minnesota Reformer newsletter, that's probably not accurate to say that the defendants on trial and their lawyers and the prosecutors are the only ones who know the identities of the jurors, because given the way technology is today, it's not really that difficult to determine somebody's identity if you can get a picture of them often, or you could. They were not sequestered during the trial, so you could follow them home. Use all kinds of ways that you could find out the identity of a juror, and once you know the identity of a juror, you get their address pretty easily, or vice versa. If you were to follow them home, you got their address, you probably get their identity. So, to me, I think there's a much wider pool of possible suspects in the bribery case. And mind you, I'm not an investigator, but I think just common sense would tell us that it's not just these defendants, because remember, there's 63 other defendants in this case so far. A number of them have already pleaded guilty. One has left the country, but you've got a lot of people who are waiting for trial, and they have a lot on the line here, because I think if there's going to be convictions in this case, you're likely to see a lot more cooperation going forward from defendants and other suspects, because other people could be indicted. It was a $250 million scheme. The current defendants are only accused, I think, of taking or misusing $49 million. So there's other defendants, there's other suspects, there's pretty high-profile people. We know that, for instance, a Minneapolis City Councilman's wife was involved in the feeding her in the meals program. So she's not been charged. There's prominent people who have a lot on the line with this verdict, not because they themselves are on trial, but because if a guilty conviction comes down on these 7 defendants, or for preponderance of them, it doesn't look good for future defendants, if that makes sense.
Well, and to your point as well, I think you brought up a great aspect that while it could be someone in the courtroom, that's not necessarily the case, just because of the technology that you said's out there, where it could very easily be someone that wasn't in the courtroom. Are authorities broadening their investigation in terms of who made it, and to maybe someone who was outside the court? Because obviously, if you're the prosecutor, the judge in this case, you got to figure out who is the person that's attempting to bribe these jurors, because, well, you could essentially have a mistrial or something that completely throw a big wrench in this, which I'm sure is kind of what the defense wants, which would be a mistrial. But any ideas on who exactly they're looking for in terms of who could be trying to make these payments to the jurors?
Well, I have a strong sense that they are really going to investigate this really forcefully and aggressively and quickly, because it really just strikes at the heart of the justice system. I have a contact in federal law enforcement in another state that I sent this to, and his response was just, period, my period, God, period. I mean, it's just so crazy, and the kind of behavior that that undermines the entire legal system. And so I think they're going to take this very seriously, and it doesn't sound like the person who delivered the bag of money was super careful. They had a conversation at the door with the juror's father-in-law. We have a description of the person. We have a description of the car. We know it's a Mazda. If the juror's address had a Ring doorbell or any kind of surveillance, if a neighbor did, if anybody caught a license plate, this thing will get rolled up pretty quickly. They now have seized the phones of the defendants. The lead prosecutor in the case, noticed that as soon as he announced this in open court, one of the defendants started quickly typing away on his phone. That doesn't mean he's guilty, but certainly interesting behavior. And so they seized the phones. They got the search warrant. They're going to be looking at all kinds of the correspondence that was happening on those defendants' cell phones. So I'd be very surprised if this became a cold case.
You can read more about Dina's great reporting on this over at MinnesotaReformer.com. That's MinnesotaReformer.com. And one final story briefly want to touch on you about has to do with Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty and DFL Governor Tim Walz, because Mary Moriarty attacked Governor Walz on Monday, accusing him of meddling in her prosecution of State Patrol Officer Ryan Lundgren, who shot and killed Ricky Cobb during a traffic stop on I-94 in Minneapolis last summer. She says it's because, quote, I'm a queer woman in this role, unquote. So before we get into this, into the dispute between Walz and Mary Moriarty, I'm just curious, what power would Governor Walz have to reassign this case? Because as I understand it, this was kind of the threat that was hanging over the head of Mary Moriarty, is that she might be removed from this case. She ultimately did decide to remove herself for the case, but ultimately the governor does have the power to do this at the county level, it sounds like.
Yeah, he can take a case, and he's done that before in the past, and so I think there's there was already a bit of tension there. If you remember, there was a juvenile case that Moriarty came to a plea agreement. The family of the victim thought it was too lenient. The case went. The governor took it and gave it to Attorney General Keith Ellison. So he certainly has that power. And according to State Trooper Londrigan's attorney, on Tuesday he was approached by the governor's counsel, and they asked about a change of prosecutor, which I don't know. I found that a little unusual. But in any case, Moriarty says that none of that, which she called credible rumors of her being removed from the case, had anything to do with her decision to drop the charges. She says she dropped the charges because Londrigan's State Patrol trainer provided a declaration stating that he never trained Londrigan to refrain from physically extracting people from a running car, which is what set the whole events in motion last summer. So, there was going to be that evidence that he was acting according to his training, and then also that he felt that his partner on the other side of the car was in danger because Ricky Cobb was reaching for his gun. And so Moriarty says, well, that was new evidence, and that the body camera footage could not prove or disprove, but in any case, it would be a problem in court if he were to testify that he thought his partner's life was in danger because Ricky Cobb was reaching for his gun, and that's why he shot. So she dropped the charges. But it wasn't enough for her to just drop the charges. She went on quite a little media tour that started on Sunday night and continued into Monday, and she certainly hit Walz hard and claimed that Walz was kind of following the political whims on his decisions rather than what is proper legally and from a criminal justice standpoint. And I think that's a fair criticism to make. But then she also said that the reason that Walz's hostility was related to the fact that she's a queer woman. And this kind of brought a lot of blowback. Tim Walz was a founder of when he was a teacher at West Mankato High School of a Gay Straight Alliance group. He was, I think, the first advisor along with Glenn Walz. I talked to, when he was running for governor the first time, I talked to students there who said they were just such a great steadying presence for gay students. He ran on gay marriage in his first run for Congress in 2006, which people don't realize it now maybe, but that was a big deal at the time. I mean, George W. Bush had been reelected, some thought on the strength of his anti-gay marriage message in certain states. So here's Walz running in the first district in Minnesota. I think generally we'd associate it with fairly conservative cultural values. He's running on marriage equality in 2006 and wins on it, and has certainly been viewed by LGBTQ folks as an ally, and he got statements of support to that effect, including from Angie Craig, who's I think the first open lesbian mom in Congress and the first openly lesbian member of Congress from Minnesota, et cetera. So I think that was probably, maybe she feels that way, and she gets a lot of support from the fact she just says what she feels. But I think that was probably a statement that she would have been better off keeping to herself, just because he does have a lot of credibility on the issue and a lot of supporters.
Yeah, he is the governor of Minnesota, and as I've at least seen so far, it seems like the vast majority, if not all, of the kind of DFL party apparatus has largely been lining up behind Governor Tim Walz in this case. You can read more about that over at MinnesotaReformer.com, MinnesotaReformer.com, as well as the other great stories that they have been working on. We are just about out of time for today, but we have been speaking with Patrick Coolican, who is the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Reformer. Patrick, as always, thanks for coming on the show today.
Always a pleasure.
All right, let's take a break and send things back over to Matt McNeil on AM 950.
AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. And by the way, we got another pair of tickets to Orville Peck to give away here in just a little bit. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So I will say there has been, with the news of yesterday, just really quick, a second juror from the Feeding Our Future trial has been excused after they heard about the first attempted bribe. They themselves weren't bribed, but they heard about it, and so they removed them, which, because, let's be honest, it takes a little bit of away the impartiality of the whole thing, as they're trying to work through that case still yet. But I want to take some time to talk about Mary Moriarty and her comments about Governor Tim Walz. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty complained publicly again on Tuesday that DFL Governor Tim Walz treats her differently than her male predecessor because she's a queer woman, a claim swiftly refuted by the governor and his allies. Moriarty initially made the comment to a Star Tribune reporter as she revealed that she would drop the murder and manslaughter charges against Trooper Ryan Londrigan and the shooting of Ricky Cobb the last day, summer, the traffic stop. The top prosecutor in the state, most populous and busy county, talked at length about her critics, including the governor, delegitimizing the system. She said the criticism was personal as well. I never saw this happen to my predecessor. She said in an interview, why is the governor treating me this way? Why is the governor questioning me in something that I asked myself and others quite a few times? Well, because you're doing a really crap job at your job. You're not doing your job very well. I'll answer that question for you. Because you're doing your job so poorly that other people have to step in. I am a white, straight man. I will freely admit that from the get-go here. I voted for Mary Moriarty. I voted for her. I thought she was the change. She never once, she talked about needing change in the office, but she never, during the campaign, stated to the extent at what she was being willing to change. And I have talked about this over and over again on this show with Mary Moriarty. Did the system need to be fixed? Yes. And trust me, Mary, I called for the dismissal of your predecessor numerous times. It was bad. I mean, it was bad. Jaleel Stallings should have been the end of him, and yet he was able to retire on his own terms. It was bad. The system was broken, undeniably, and still is broken. Look at Ricky Cobb, the whole thing there. And police officers don't pull their guns, fingers on the trigger, safety off, round in the chamber with white guys in the suburbs. But black guy, get those guns out. When you look at when she came in, and the first case was, or the first major case was, she wasn't going to charge the shooters in a case because they were young and their brains hadn't developed, and henceforth they were going to be sent home to watch Netflix and get DoorDash, and that's their punishment. That's where I was like, wait a second, what are you doing? What are you doing? You have a case, and I've said this before, and I don't want to, by the way, I don't want to hear this crap about brain size. No, they were the triggermen in a murder. I've had 3 15-year-olds. Not every time, none of them ever murdered anybody. I'm not saying that their crimes aren't a product of their environment, but there has to be punishment more than, you pinky swear you're not going to murder anybody else? There's got to be more to that. There's got to be. The Mary Moriarty that took office was very different from the Mary Moriarty that campaigned. And it suddenly became this extreme. It was a county attorney via theory. And by the way, a theory that's being tested in other communities as well. That instead of and I'm paraphrasing here, this is not necessarily anything Mary Moriarty has said, but it's as opposed to prison, we're going to have a drum circle and some pancakes. And we're going to talk out our problems. Well, great if it works. It doesn't work. San Francisco was the most blatant implosion of this false mentality that you basically can just let everyone go, and as long as you just got your stern wagon figure out there and waggy, that basically you can correct hardcore serial criminals with just, a dance and a sing. And that doesn't work. And in San Francisco, it imploded and blew up in their face. And they actually, in San Francisco, they recalled her. I believe it was the attorney, the city attorney over there was recalled because the system was failing spectacularly. The I've watched as there has been a kid gloves mentality towards carjackers, and once again, I'm not saying a carjacker necessarily needs to get locked up. As a matter of fact, let me take a quick second. Let me share what my mentality was, and I thought that Mary Moriarty was about. Let me when I voted for her, let me tell you what I thought she was going to do. Let's take a carjacking. Say that there's a vehicle with 3 people in it, and 2 guys pull up, and one guy drives the car that they drove up in. The other guy jumps out, grabs the car, throws the guy out of that car, drives that car away, and they both drive away. The third guy is just someone sitting in the back seat of that car and was part of the crime because of their association, but really didn't partake in anything there. And we know this for a fact. Does that third person need to go to jail for a substantial period of time? Of course not. And as a matter of fact, if they truly didn't do anything, I don't know if it does us a lot of good to lock a person like that up for an extended period of time. It's not their responsibility per se to call the police and turn in their buddies. And so, but although you feel sad that this kid is getting into the wrong element, if they didn't do anything wrong, they should. That third kid probably shouldn't get prosecuted. Obviously, you prosecute the kid that stole the car. Obviously, you prosecute the getaway driver. But you don't necessarily have to do that. And so, as opposed to in the past where a kid like that, by just being in the car, would get 6 years in prison, I think that obviously you can make an argument that that's not doing a lot of good to anyone. There you go. Common sense. You have someone who's a serial burglar, someone who's shoplifting at stores, and because they're riddled with an addiction. They basically don't have any other options, and so if they want food, they have to try to steal it, and that's the only thing they can, and you catch this person. Sure, after the 8th or 9th time, the person has to go to jail for a little bit because they've been stealing. But it doesn't have to be a life sentence. I mean, some of these states that are throwing people away forever and ever because of a Twinkie, I don't think that's doing anyone any good. But you put them in jail for 30, 60 days, and there's a mandatory drug treatment program that the person has to go through. And hopefully you can clean up that person's life. Once again, a punishment worthy of the crime. Not, 7 years in prison because you took some Fritos. So, and obviously we can go with I would like a Hennepin County attorney that wouldn't look at the Jaleel Stallings body cam footage and say, who the real problem here is? The guy getting beaten in the street. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So that's when I voted for Mary Moriarty. That's what I was kind of hoping for. Some common sense refrained, but not you murdered somebody? Well, your brain size isn't quite there. Jesus, really? I can't tell you how much I lost in support for her with that whole case. Then comes the Londrigan case. And once again, we can definitely talk about the fact that the state of Minnesota having legal summary executions doled out by police officers is not something, it's a good thing, and we should probably address that. But because Republicans wrote these laws the way they did, all a police officer has to do is say, I was scared. I was so scared. I was so scared. And there's no crime there. That's just the reality of it. And what I'm saying is that you should have never, prosecuted Londrigan. You're not going to win that case. You were just, because the state law is there. And it seems as if you had prosecutors in your own office who basically wanted nothing to do with this case. You were having to try to hire some out-of-state legal firm to prosecute this case. Because my guess is you couldn't find anyone locally that was saying, yeah, I'm going to prosecute this case. And it got to a point where you, as the county attorney, being so ambivalent of the law in the state, which basically said all an officer has to do is say, I was scared. There you go. The fact that you just kept going down this road until Governor Walz had to basically start saying, okay, I'm going to intervene here. That tells me you missed. Your job is not to prosecute the world that you wish we had. It's to prosecute the world that we do have and make it not something which is abhorrently bigoted towards the black community or the Native American community or the Hispanic community as it has been. Not do what you've been doing. Governor Tim Walz is an outstanding governor. If you look at the laundry list of bills he signed off on last year. Reminder, the only one that he didn't was the Uber Lyft bill last year. He signed every single bill. Bills that backed up women's rights, bills that backed up LGBTQ rights over and over again. It wasn't just one bill. It was tons of bills that he passed showing support for women, showing support for the LGBTQ population. I get you're frustrated, but to accuse Governor Walz of something that just is not true is not going to win people over. Now, Governor Walz may not like you. Frankly, Mary, I don't like you that much anymore. But I don't like you because you seem somewhat incompetent at your job. And that's just the truth. I think Mary Moriarty should resign. I think that she came in with an agenda which was not only misguided, but unattainable. And now she's to the point where people making legitimate criticism. Once again, I'm not saying I feel as if what happened to Ricky Cobb at the hands of Londrigan was a good thing, but I'm also smart enough to understand the laws of the state and how in the hell this talking chimp in this radio station was able to sit here months ago and say, you're not going to file that. You're not going to win that case. You're not going to win that case. You're not going to win that case. How I can see it so clearly and yet you couldn't, I don't know. But I think it's you're blinded by your agenda, and now you're to the point where anyone being critical of your mismanagement of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office is now just, oh, they don't like me because I'm a woman or I'm queer or both. No, that's not true. Mary, I want you to resign. But I want you to resign because you just don't seem like you're a very good attorney. I'm sorry to be so blunt. I'm sorry it hurts. I'm sure you'll find 1,000 ways to criticize me because I'm saying it. But I just laid out exactly why you lost me. And once again, I want to remind you, 2 years ago, I voted for you. I voted for you. And you've lost me. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Tuesday. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I got another pair of tickets to give away to Orville Peck at the Armory. Let's do this right now. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Caller number 5. Caller number 5, you're going to get yourself a pair of tickets to go see Orville Peck at the Armory on June 11th. Good luck there. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Minnesota GOP, this is a story from Heartland Signal I mentioned last hour I was going to read. They've endorsed the former basketball player and reactionary figure Royce White to try to unseat Amy Klobuchar, but the move, which will certainly pay towards the party's main base, could prove ineffective at actually winning an election. He has a long history of anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ sentiments, conspiracy theories, and misogyny. Additionally, the one-time NBA player is considered a protege of Trump whisperer and far-right mogul Steve Bannon and hosts a show on Real America's Voice, the same channel Bannon broadcasts his podcast from. And now, after the vote on the Minnesota GOP convention on May 19th, 67% of the convention goers selected White as their nominee in the state. White's only other electoral experience in 2022, he attempted to unseat Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. However, he lost the Republican primary by about 11 points. Before pivoting to the Republican Party, White is a prominent Minneapolis activist during the 2020 George Floyd protests. Since then, White became invested in the ideological messaging of right-wing intellectuals like Jordan Peterson, Alex Jones, and Glenn Beck. Intellectuals. They did use the in quotes on the intellectual term there. Absolutely. His current politics could be described as tinfoil hat populism, the journalist Eamon Wallen wrote in his definitive profile of White. He believes that actually is a great tinfoil hat populism. He believes that the Democrats, Bill Gates, the World Economic Forum, President Xi Jinping, the CCP, non-MAGA Republicans, George Soros, millennial purple-haired white liberal women, the Church of the LGBTQ, the National Basketball Association, and the various government agencies all act on behalf of the same global corporate community. Whalen expected Mother Jones. The NBA's in there? Such crank positions have manifested themselves predominantly on social media. Media Matters for America, a liberal watchdog group, compiled just a sample of White's virulent profanity and bigotry online. White is a prolific poster as well as a frequent guest on shows like InfoWars and Tucker Carlson. Additionally, White uses his own platform, a podcast called Please Call Me Crazy, to attack his perceived enemies. White has pushed the right-wing media conspiracy theories, including about the hammer attack on Paul Pelosi, the tragic Maui wildfires, and the 2020 election. Media Matters described the recent post. He's also virulently anti-LGBTQ, writing, the LGBTQ movement is the brainchild of radical feminists and their cucked men. At least from a political standpoint, he has claimed that former professional basketball player Charles Barkley was influenced by a Jewish cabal. And he's the Republican nominee in the state. You know, when I look, and I imagine Joe Biden's the same way, when I say to myself, you know, how much time and effort do we have to put in Minnesota? Hey, Royce White is the top of their ticket for this election cycle, right below Donald Trump. Okay, hey, well, I think we're doing good. Doesn't mean we don't all vote. Everyone votes every election for sure. Native Roots Radio is up next. Have a good one. We are back tomorrow. Till then, see ya.